Well, North Korea's declining birth rate has left dictator Kim Jong Un in tears, quite literally. While hosting the National Mothers Meeting, Kim Jong Un quietly wept and dabbed his face with a handkerchief. What was his appeal? To get women to pop out more babies. Here's our next report.
The auditorium was full. Seats were lined with North Korean women, most of them mothers. They were here for the National Mothers Meeting. On the panel sat North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. Just slightly into the meeting, a speaker addressed the gathering. From what it appears, he talked of North Korea's plummeting birth rate. This was enough to make the dictator emotional. Tears welled into his eyes. Unable to control them, he looked down and wiped them off with a handkerchief. What did Kim Jong Un want? More little Uns. Soon it set off a chain reaction. More handkerchiefs were out. Women in the audience started sobbing too. That's the hold Kim Jong Un has on his people. Dear mothers, he said, addressing the meeting. He further added that North Korea is being confronted with a host of social tasks and that mothers should join to tackle them. He called for women to have more babies. He said preventing a decline in the birth rate and good childcare are housekeeping duties. After the dictator's emotional plea, should we expect a surge in North Korea's birth rate? How dire is the situation really? The United Nations Population Fund estimates that the country's fertility rate stands at 1.8, and it has steadily declined over the last decade. But Kim Jong Un wants to change that. He wants more children who can carry forward the so-called revolution. He wants them to eliminate non-socialist practices. Few decades back, this was not the case. In the 70s and 80s, North Korea had birth control programs in place. Why, you may ask? In order to slow down a post-war population growth. Then in mid-1990s, there was a deadly famine. Millions died, many starved to death. Currently, the Hamid Kingdom has a population of 25 million, and it has never been able to feed them. So why does it expect its people to have more children? When North Korea shut its border in January 2020, authorities stopped importing grain from China. Also, the fertilizers and machinery needed to grow food on more than one occasion. Kim Jong Un has hinted at the seriousness of the situation. At one point, he openly referred to a food crisis. Despite this, he has prioritized funding his nuclear weapons program. Last year, he tested a record 63 ballistic missiles. The total cost of these tests is estimated to be more than $500 million. This is more than the amount needed to make up for North Korea's annual grain shortfall. The country needs to put its priorities straight, and it's not just food. North Korea lacks resources and technological advancements as well. With the birth rate plummeting, it could also face shortage of labor force. Was it a thought of this grim future that made Kim Jong Un cry? Or was it simply a rehearsed plea to convince North Korean mothers? We'll never know. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And just what is Benjamin Netanyahu's endgame in Gaza? Let's focus on the Israel-Hamas war now. Is it to decimate Hamas? Is it to have control over all of Gaza? What happens when Israeli forces take over the entire Gaza Strip? Do they hand back charge eventually to the Palestinians? And why does Netanyahu want to prolong this war, even as the Biden administration is pushing for a faster solution? First, let's listen in to what Prime Minister Netanyahu has had to say.
After Hamas, Gaza needs to be demilitarized. But in order for Gaza to be demilitarized, there's just one force that can do it, and that power is the IDF. No international force can be responsible for that. We saw in other places that what happened when they brought in international forces for demilitarization. I'm not willing to close my eyes and accept any other arrangement.
So according to the statement, the IDF should retain control of Gaza even after the war. He said there will be no international involvement, no international forces. 60 days after the war, Israeli forces have encircled all of Gaza, pushing back thousands of civilians to rush to the Rafah border with Egypt or simply die. Netanyahu believes it must be a complete purge. Hamas must be wiped off from the face of the earth. He says he won't stop until he has achieved this goal. But can the Hamas be disarmed completely? Well, its forces are spread all across. It has regional partners, support from other Arab nations. According to the Wall Street Journal, there are some 30,000 odd fighters in Gaza alone. Only 5,000 of those have been killed. You see, Hamas still retains the majority of its fighting forces. Can Netanyahu really destroy the Hamas? And how long is it going to take? According to the French President Macron, it would take a decade. Listen in to what he said.
Aujourd'hui, il est suspendu, vous l'avez très bien dit.
We are at a moment when Israeli authorities must more precisely define their objectives and their final goal, the total destruction of Hamas. Does anyone think it is possible? If this is the case, the war will last 10 years, and I don't think that anyone can seriously define these objectives, so they need to be defined.
La position de la France ne change pas sur ce point. Je me rendrai, vous l'avez dit, juste après.
And who says that Hamas is just going to wait and watch during this time? In 10 years, thousands more can join the group. Has Netanyahu factored in all of this? Maybe he has. He is Israel's longest-serving prime minister. He has been in the war zone himself. He was part of an elite unit of the Israeli army. Back in 1973, he served in the Yom Kippur War. Put simply, Netanyahu knows his way around wars. But is his strategy against Hamas? Netanyahu says it is impossible to achieve his goals without a ground incursion. So, he has razed Gaza to the ground. But what has that really achieved? Other than the fact that thousands of civilians have been killed. Hamas leaders, including its chief, Yahya Sinwar, are cooped up in underground tunnels. Netanyahu has a solution for this. And what exactly is that solution? To flood the tunnels with seawater. Israel has reportedly assembled a system of large pumps, and it is mulling to use it for flooding Gaza's vast network of underground tunnels. The system has at least 5 pumps. Each of them can draw water from the Mediterranean Sea and move thousands of cubic meters of water every hour. It would not only drive Hamas out, but also destroy the tunnels for good. How long would that take? Roughly a few weeks. Israeli forces have already flattened northern Gaza. Now they are aiming to force Hamas out of Khan Yunis. But where do hostages feature in Netanyahu's strategy? About 137 hostages still remain unaccounted for. What is Israel doing to bring them back? And what about the other civilians? Around 16,200 have been killed in Gaza. 7,100 of those are children. 4,900 women. All of this for what? Hamas is only 5,000 fighters short. Going by these numbers, for each Hamas personnel, more than 3 civilians have been killed. Israel has put the figure at 2. It even has a ratio. The Israeli military says 2 civilians killed for every Hamas militant is a tremendously positive ratio. Netanyahu is facing heavy external pressure to stop civilian casualties. Reports say the US wants the war to be wrapped up by January. Several other countries have condemned Israel for the deaths of innocents. Many of them are from West Asia. But civilians are still dying in hundreds by the day. Is Netanyahu simply trying to prolong the war? What would he achieve by that? More time in power, I guess. Because at this point, his survival in office cannot be taken for granted. His corruption trial has resumed. Would Israel risk a chance or a change in leadership rather during these tough times? Seems unlikely. The Hamas attack, which has shifted the focus from Netanyahu's failures to the war, and keeping that war going on now seems to be his survival strategy. He has vowed to continue till Hamas comes to an end. We begin with a disturbing question, a question which should be asked of America and all those who claim they are committed to the worldwide war against terrorism. Why is Panon, the leader of a violent Indian separatist group who has found sanctuary in America, walking free? This is not a general question. It is a specific question. Panon has just threatened to blow up the Indian Parliament on December 13th. You heard that right. Blow up the Indian Parliament while it is in session, killing as many members and staff as he can. Why does America shield the professed terrorist despite his threats against India? Why is this fountainhead of Khalistani terrorism not in custody? Will American authorities act only after he has acted on his terror threat? We do not make this demand lightly. We ask on the basis of evidence. The man we're about to show you on your screen is an all too familiar face in India. His name is Gurpatwant Singh Panon. He is the head of the terror group known as SFJ, short for Sikhs for Justice. This terrorist, Panon, has released a chilling video. He has threatened to attack India's new parliament building on December 13th. Now look at the video on your screens. We have muted it so that our channel does not become a platform for hate speech and incitement to terrorism and violence. This Khalistani terrorist, whose well-being seems to be of paramount importance to the West, has brazenly threatened to blow up the Indian Parliament, the symbol of India's democracy itself. The level of arrogance is just staggering. In response to an alleged failed murder plot against him, Panon has released this video. In 2001, the terrorists who attacked the Indian Parliament that day were from the Lashkar-e-Toiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, terrorist outfits operating from Pakistan. The Khalistani separatist movement has always been supported by Pakistani hawks who have used the Pakistan intelligence agency, the ISI, as their assault arm against India. 22 years ago, 6 police personnel, 2 parliament security personnel and 1 gardener were killed in the terror attacks. Panon's video featured a poster of the parliament attack convict Afzal Guru with the caption, "Delhi Banega Khalistan," which literally translates to "Delhi will be made Khalistan." In his video, Panon says that his response, quote unquote, will shake the very foundations of India's parliament. According to reliable reports, Panon is not making idle threats. His group has been recruiting people for the execution of this attack. Panon is a designated terrorist who, from the comfort of his terror headquarters in New York City, routinely issues threats against India, its leaders, its diplomats, and its people. And this time, well, it has been stirred by unsubstantiated reports that India has been planning his elimination. This charge was made by Canada, but Canada refused to provide reliable evidence of this charge. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, however, persuaded some elements in the American establishment to pick up this unsubstantiated narrative. Panon's threat comes at a time when the Parliament's winter session is underway. It will go on till December 22nd. New Delhi takes this threat seriously. The city has been placed in a heightened state of alert. Security has already been stepped up in and around the Parliament and across the Indian national capital. But what is the response from the US? After all, Panon lives in New York, not Delhi. And according to reports, the US is in the process of assessing what this terrorist, Panon, is planning specifically. The irony is unbelievable. An acknowledged terrorist says publicly that his group members will blow up India's parliament. This amounts to a public confession, and America is still waiting for evidence. Washington or the New York police are yet to react to this chilling video. This begs the question, if a similar threat had been made within the US, would the Americans have been equally complacent? The answer is a clear no. This is not the first time Panon has unleashed his vitriol against India. Earlier, he threatened to blow up India's flag carrier, Air India. His threats have been accompanied by political action. He has organized referendums endorsing the creation of a separate state from India. Born in Khankot village in Punjab, Panon is the son of a former State Agriculture Marketing Board employee. He is believed to have graduated from the Punjab University in 1990s and founded the SFJ in 2007. In 2019, the Indian government banned the SFJ under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and for its anti-India activities. A year later, Panon was declared an individual terrorist under the same law for promoting separatist activities and for encouraging the youth to take up arms. In September this year, Panon warned Hindu Canadians to leave Canada amid the diplomatic row that broke out between India and Canada over the killing of another Khalistani terrorist, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, in Canada. Panon blamed India for Nijjar's death, but had no evidence for this, of course. Panon currently faces 33 criminal cases in India. A court in India has issued non-bailable warrant against him. Now, with this latest video, Panon has threatened India 3 times in 3 months. Yet, last month, the US Department of Justice made a bizarre allegation against an unidentified Indian official. They say that this person orchestrated a hit job on Panon. Consider this. A designated terrorist continuously issues threats against India and the US, which is supposed to be India's key partner in countering terrorism, remains quiet and indifferent. How long will the US allow its soil to be used by anti-India forces? 13 December is only a few days away. Will Washington act?